Ava Mercer tightened her grip on the shopping basket as the grocery store speakers played a cheerful holiday tune that only made the knot in her stomach draw tighter. Every aisle she turned down reminded her that Christmas was no longer simply a holiday. It was an exam, a test she had been failing for years. The fluorescent lights felt too bright, the air too warm. Her phone buzzed for the 5th time in under an hour, and she did not need to look to know who it was. Family group chat. The Mercer women never slept during the holiday week. She exhaled sharply as her mother's last message replayed in her mind. "Come home with someone this year, Ava. We are not letting you hide behind your career forever." Her aunts had chimed in seconds later with their trademark chorus of concern disguised as interrogation. "Is he serious? What does he do? Does he treat you well?" Ava had typed out a dozen variations of "I am coming alone" before deleting each one. Facing the Mercer Christmas firing squad single-handedly felt unbearable. She rounded the corner too fast. The basket slammed into something solid, or rather, someone. Everything jumped from her hands at once. A carton of eggs flipped, a bag of flour spun. Apples rolled across the polished floor like tiny red alarms. Ava froze, then crouched to gather them, cheeks flaring with heat. "I am so sorry," she blurted without looking up. "I am a complete disaster today." A quiet breath of amusement drifted down toward her before she finally lifted her gaze and found herself staring into cool blue eyes framed by the sharp lines of a man who looked entirely out of place in this chaotic store. Tall, composed, a striking stillness about him as if everything around him obeyed a different gravity. "No harm done," he said, while kneeling to help her. "But you seem like someone who has other disasters on her mind." Ava blinked, unsure whether she should be offended or impressed. Something about him felt observant in a way that made her pulse jump. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out strained. "It is Christmas. My family treats it like a competitive sport." He nodded as if that explained everything. "And you are losing." "Completely," she admitted. There was no reason to keep talking. She should have escaped. Yet she remained there on the floor with a stranger who looked at her as though he could see past the defense mechanisms she had perfected over years in a courtroom. She stood quickly, brushing flour from her coat. Her phone buzzed again, lighting up with another message from her mother. She groaned without meaning to. "Tough crowd," he said. "Tough does not begin to cover it." He studied her for a long moment. Most people would smile politely and move on. He did not. Instead, he asked the single question that pierced her composure more than any family interrogation ever had. "What exactly are you afraid of walking into this Christmas?" Ava opened her mouth, then closed it again. Honesty was not her default setting, certainly not with strangers, certainly not with strangers who looked like him. But something cracked. The pressure, the loneliness, the dread of disappointing everyone at once. It all swirled to the surface. Everything she whispered, absolutely everything. Ava tried to walk away. She told herself she needed to get her groceries, go home, craft some lie her family would believe, and prepare for the annual emotional ambush that awaited her in Northwood. But her steps were unsteady, her breathing ragged, and the stranger with the unnervingly calm presence followed her thoughts, even after she left him behind in the baking aisle. She was staring blankly at a shelf of cranberry sauce when his voice appeared beside her again, smooth and quiet enough to startle her without being intrusive. "I think I know what you need." Ava turned sharply. He stood there with the same composed expression, hands casually resting in his coat pockets, as if running into her again was something he had fully intended. "You do not even know me," she said, attempting a defensive half-laugh. He regarded her carefully. "I know what it looks like when someone is drowning in expectations. And I know what escape looks like too." Ava blinked, caught off guard. She wanted to ask who he was and how he could read her so effortlessly, but she stopped herself. Curiosity was dangerous. Vulnerability even more so. He lowered his voice as though he were offering a classified solution. "Let me come with you." Ava stared, unsure if she had misheard. Come with me where? Home. For Christmas. She nearly dropped the can in her hand. Excuse me. You need someone, he said plainly. Someone to run interference. Someone who can convince your family you are fine. Happier than fine. Someone who can carry the weight of their expectations for a few days. Her heart thudded wildly. Is this a joke? He shook his head once. I am serious. Ava searched his face, expecting to find mischief or arrogance. She found neither, only clarity. As though he had decided something long before she even understood there was a decision to be made. Why would you do that? She whispered. Because I can, and because you looked at your phone like it was about to detonate. A nervous laugh slipped out before she could stop it. He stepped closer, not enough to be inappropriate, but enough that she could see a faint scar near his jawline. Sharp edges softened by the warmth of his voice. Let me help you, Ava. Her breath caught. He remembered her name, though she was certain she had not given it. That should have alarmed her, but instead it felt strange and intimate, as though he had memorized it the moment she spoke. She swallowed hard. If I say yes, this has to be structured. He nodded. I assumed as much. The next thing she knew, they were seated across from each other, at a quiet cafe near the store. Ava opened her laptop, hands trembling slightly, and drafted an agreement with all the precision she used to craft court documents. Duration, boundaries, compensation, confidentiality, expectations. He scanned every clause with a lawyer's patience, though she sensed he was not one. His eyes were too calculating, too observant. He signed without hesitation, then added 2 handwritten additions at the bottom. Ava leaned forward, reading them slowly. Her stomach dropped. 1. You do not investigate me. No searches, no questions, no background checks. 2. This arrangement ends the moment Christmas Day begins at midnight. No extensions, no renegotiations. Ava looked up at him, stunned. What kind of man imposes rules like these? But he only held her gaze with calm finality. If we do this, he said, it cannot get complicated. Too late, she thought. It already was. The tires of Ava's car crunched over hardened snow as the familiar wooden gate of the Mercer farm came into view. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened and tried to steady her breathing. Beside her, Ethan Ward sat with that impossible stillness, gazing through the windshield as though assessing a strategic battlefield rather than a holiday visit. This is a terrible idea, Ava muttered under her breath. Probably, Ethan replied calmly, but we are past the point of retreat. She shot him a sharp look. You are not helping. He offered the faintest smile. I know. The farmhouse door swung open before the car even stopped. Rachel Mercer charged out with her signature whirlwind energy, scarf flying behind her like a comet tail. Ava braced herself. Ava Mercer, where have you been? We thought. Her voice halted as she caught sight of Ethan stepping out of the passenger seat. Her eyes widened. Well now, who is this? Ava drew a breath. Rachel, this is Ethan. Ethan, this is my sister. Rachel's expression turned predatory in the way only older siblings could manage. She circled Ethan once, assessing him with the intensity of a customs officer training a spotlight on contraband. Tall, polished, handsome enough to be suspicious. Ethan extended his hand politely. A pleasure to meet you, Rachel. Rachel's eyes narrowed further. Oh, he has manners. Very suspicious indeed. Before Ava could intervene, Aunt Marianne and Aunt Judith appeared behind Rachel like a coordinated investigative task force. They descended upon Ethan with delighted gasps and eager curiosity. Aunt Marianne clasped her hands dramatically. My goodness, Ava, you did not tell us he was this striking. Aunt Judith elbowed her sister. Or that he looks like he actually moisturizes. Ethan faced the ambush with the kind of composure Ava had only seen in seasoned litigators. He greeted both aunts by name, even though he had just heard them once in passing during the drive up. They melted instantly. Ava almost groaned aloud. This was not how things were supposed to go. She needed them to be skeptical, distracted, not starstruck. The interrogation began the moment they ushered him inside. The farmhouse smelled of cinnamon, pine, and a hint of wood smoke. The living room glowed with warm lights as Ethan took a seat on the couch, immediately flanked by both aunts. "So, Ethan, what do you do for work?" Aunt Judith asked casually, though her eyes gleamed with strategic intent. Ethan smiled in that maddeningly vague way. "I work in management." "Management of what?" Aunt Marianne pressed. "Teams." Aunt Judith raised an eyebrow. "Large teams or small teams?" Ava nearly choked on a breath. Her aunts had cornered CEOs for less. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Both, depending on the quarter." Rachel leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Ava, that is the vaguest answer I have ever heard." Ethan did not flinch. "Confidentiality is a necessary part of my profession." Aunt Marianne sighed dreamily. "Oh, mysterious. I like him." Ava shot Ethan a warning glance, but he only offered a reassuring tilt of his head. She could not understand how he maintained such steadiness, or why he had decided to give her exactly what she asked for, with such precision it bordered on sorcery. The interrogation continued through dinner. Questions about how they met, how long they had been together, what Ethan saw in Ava. Each time he answered with a measured warmth that made it impossible for the family to doubt him. By the time dessert was served, Ava realized something far more dangerous than suspicion was unfolding. Her family was beginning to genuinely like him. And Ethan Ward was playing the role flawlessly. Too flawlessly. Which terrified her more than any interrogation ever could. The next morning dawned pale and icy, the kind of winter light that made the Mercer farm look like a postcard. Ava pulled on her boots and coat, determined to take a quiet walk before the household fully woke. She needed space. She needed oxygen. She needed to remember that this entire scenario was performative and temporary, no matter how convincingly Ethan slipped into the role she had assigned him. But the moment she stepped outside, she heard the giggling, the dangerous kind, the kind that belonged to the Mercer twins. Before she could retreat, something hard and cold smacked into the side of her boot. Ava looked down at the lopsided snowball. She froze, slowly lifted her gaze. Finn and Leo were crouched behind a half-built snow fort with the fierce determination of small warriors. Their mittens were soaked, their faces flushed with excitement, their aim evidently lethal. The twins spotted her and groaned. "Oh, it is just Ava," Leo said. "We thought you were the target." Ava frowned. "The target for what?" Finn pointed a mitten toward the barn. "He is over there. Tall guy, dark coat, moves like he thinks he is in an action movie." Ava's stomach twisted. Ethan. Before she could issue a warning, another snowball flew from the twins' fort, arcing beautifully toward the barn. It detonated on Ethan's shoulder in a burst of white. He stopped mid-step, glanced down at the residue, then looked toward the twins with a slow, deliberate turn of his head. Leo whispered dramatically, "We have angered the giant." Ava braced for irritation. Ethan was not the type to enjoy chaos. She expected a reprimand, a raised eyebrow, maybe even a retreat indoors. Instead, Ethan crouched slowly, scooped up a handful of snow, and began compacting it with clinical precision. Finn's voice cracked. "Oh no, he is building ammunition." Leo dove behind the fort, screaming incoming. Ava stared in disbelief as Ethan launched a perfect counterattack. The snowball soared in a flawless arc and exploded on the twins' fort, shaking loose a shower of powder that made the boys shriek with exhilaration. "He is good," Finn gasped. "He is really good." Ethan advanced with calm tactical efficiency, analyzing terrain as though the entire battlefield existed for his personal assessment. He ducked, rolled, countered. His coat dusted with white, his expression focused yet unmistakably amused. Ava could not look away. At one point, Finn attempted a flanking maneuver, only for Ethan to intercept him, scoop him up under one arm, and spin him in a playful half-circle, while Leo tried desperately to rescue his brother with a barrage of wildly inaccurate snowballs. It was chaos. Beautiful, unstructured, joyous chaos. Ava felt something inside her loosen. When Ethan finally released Finn, the twins collapsed into the snow with breathless laughter. Ethan straightened, caught Ava watching, and tilted his head with a quiet acknowledgement. No smugness, no theatrics. Just a soft, almost shy lift of his brow, as if asking, "Was that acceptable?" "Yes," she wanted to say. "Too acceptable." Aunt Marianne appeared on the porch with a mug of coffee. "Well, well, well. Looks like someone fits in just fine." Ava swallowed hard. That was the problem. He was not just fitting in, he was conquering. By the time night settled over the farm, the house felt unusually still. A gentle frost crept across the windows, and the smell of pine and wood smoke clung to every room. Ava carried her overnight bag down the narrow hallway assigned to her and Ethan, reminding herself for the 15th time that this was temporary, performative, contained. Then she opened the door and froze. There was only one bed, a wide quilted thing with plaid pillows and a neatly folded blanket at the foot, but unmistakably singular. No pull-out sofa, no spare mattress, no rescue. Ethan stepped in behind her and took in the scene with a quiet inhale. Well, that complicates the logistics. Ava's pulse thudded against her ribs. It is just one bed, she managed. Adults can handle one bed. "Of course," Ethan said calmly. "I will take the left side. Clear boundaries." He gestured toward the dresser. "You can place your things wherever you like." His steadiness only made her more aware of her own spiraling thoughts. She set her bag down with more force than needed and busied herself with unnecessary tasks, straightening objects that did not actually require straightening. When she finally turned, Ethan was unfolding the blanket and placing it neatly down the center of the mattress like a demarcation line. "A pillow line," he said lightly. "A territorial barrier. A survival tactic." Ava nodded too quickly. Perfect. The room dimmed when he turned off the lamp, and they climbed into opposite sides of the bed with a stiffness that would have been comical if her heart were not hammering so loudly. For several long minutes, they lay in silence, facing away from each other, pretending to breathe normally. Ava finally whispered, "You are unusually good at this." "At what?" "Acting like none of this is strange." He shifted slightly. "I have slept in more uncomfortable circumstances. Cots, floors, nights in airports. A bed is a luxury." There was a weight in his voice she had not heard before. Something lived in, something that did not match the polished exterior he wore like armor. Without thinking, she rolled onto her back. "You talk like someone who has lived a lot of lives." Ethan exhaled into the darkness. "We all have histories, Ava. Some are simply quieter than others." The silence that followed was different. Not awkward, not defensive. Something softer, thinner. She felt him turn slightly, as though he were studying the ceiling or maybe the edge of the pillow line between them. "What about you?" he asked. "What made you so determined to control everything around you?" The question slipped under her guard with surgical precision. Ava swallowed. "I grew up trying to make things perfect so they would not fall apart. It is a hard habit to break." Ethan murmured an understanding sound. "Perfection is a lonely pursuit." Her breath hitched. "That is exactly how it feels." Another silence, this one warmer. And then something unexpected happened. In her half-drowsy state, Ava shifted and her hand brushed against his chest. She jerked back instinctively, but Ethan caught her hand gently, not to restrain, but to reassure. His thumb brushed once across her knuckles before he loosened his hold. "Sleep," he said quietly. "Tomorrow will be chaos again." Ava lay awake long after his breathing deepened. She stared at the pillow line between them, a flimsy barrier against something neither of them wanted to name. Because for the first time since she met him, she understood the true danger of their arrangement. The contract might end at midnight on Christmas, but the feelings blooming in the dark had no intention of obeying it. Morning rose with the soft glow of winter sun, but Ava woke to something far less serene. A thud, a shriek, another thud. She jolted upright, blinking wildly as she tried to interpret the commotion erupting from the kitchen below. "This cannot be good," she muttered as she shoved her hair into a messy knot and hurried downstairs. The moment she stepped into the kitchen doorway, she stopped dead. It looked like an explosion had taken place. Flour coated nearly every surface in a fine white dusting. Chocolate chips scattered like shrapnel across the counters. A mixing bowl lay sideways on the floor, spinning in slow surrender, and in the middle of the battlefield stood Ethan, Finn, and Leo, each holding some form of baking weaponry with expressions ranging from triumphant to mildly guilty. Ethan blinked at Ava through a cloud of flour. "Good morning?" Ava stared at the wreckage. What are you doing?" Finn answered proudly, "We are baking." Leo corrected him, "We were baking. Then we upgraded to experimental baking." Ava lifted a trembling hand. "Why is there flour on the ceiling?" Ethan followed her gaze upward as if noticing that detail for the first time. Aerodynamics, or a miscalculated spin velocity, possibly both. A strangled sound escaped Ava's throat. "This kitchen belongs to my mother. My mother." Ethan placed a steadying hand on the edge of the counter. "We will clean everything. I promise." The promise did nothing to lower her blood pressure. She pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead, inhaling slowly. "I leave you alone for 20 minutes and it becomes a snowstorm." Finn grinned. That was the goal. Before she could issue a proper lecture, Leo lobbed a handful of flour in Ethan's direction. It missed and splattered across Ava's sweater instead. She gasped as the white powder bloomed across the fabric like a cruel irony. Finn froze. Leo froze. Ethan froze. Ava slowly lowered her gaze to the front of her sweater. There were exactly 2 seconds of tense silence. Then Ethan said quietly, "Ava, please do not panic." "I am not panicking," she said through clenched teeth. "I am simply registering the chaos." The twins exchanged a terrified glance. Then Leo whispered, "We are dead." But something unexpected happened. Ava felt a bubble of laughter rise unbidden to her chest. She tried to suppress it. She failed spectacularly. A shocked laugh burst out of her so abruptly that Finn and Leo jumped. Ava covered her mouth. "Oh no, oh no, no, what is happening to me?" Ethan's expression shifted from wary to almost astonished. "Are you laughing?" "I think I am," she gasped. "I do not usually laugh during disasters." Leo brightened. "Does that mean we are not dead?" She shook her head, smiling despite herself. "Not today." Finn immediately seized the opportunity to launch another handful of flour directly at Ethan's shoulder. This time, Ethan retaliated with a swift, precise volley that sent the twins shrieking and ducking behind the island. Chaos erupted again, but now Ava was no longer fighting it. She stepped forward, grabbed a fistful of flour like a woman possessed, and flung it at Ethan. He blinked in surprise as the powder burst across his chest. Ava pointed at him triumphantly. That was for choosing experimental baking. His lips twitched. Duly noted. The twins cheered, the kitchen filled with laughter, shrieks, and powder drifting like enchanted snowfall. Aunt Judith wandered in, froze at the sight, and simply said, "Well, I suppose breakfast will be interesting," before backing out again. Ava leaned against the counter, breathless and covered in flour. For the first time in years, she felt unburdened, uncontrolled, alive. Ethan met her eyes across the chaos, his expression softened by the faintest smile. She had not expected this to happen. He had not just participated in the family mess, he had become part of it. Night settled over the farmhouse like a heavy wool blanket, thick with quiet and the scent of cooling embers from the fireplace. Ava slipped beneath the covers with careful, practiced distance, maintaining the line of pillows separating her from Ethan. She told herself it was necessary, professional, logical, but her heartbeat insisted otherwise, thudding too loudly in the still room. Ethan lay rigid on his side, facing the window, the moonlight tracing the strong line of his shoulders. He had been uncharacteristically quiet since the whirlwind of flour and laughter earlier, and Ava could sense something restless beneath his composed exterior. Minutes stretched. Silence thickened. Then she heard it. A faint murmur, a strained inhale, a whispered no that carried the kind of weight no performance could mimic. Ava shifted, propping herself up on one elbow. Ethan's breathing had changed, ragged and uneven, his brow drawn tight even in sleep. He looked nothing like the confident man she had met in the grocery store. This was someone haunted. "Ethan," she whispered. He didn't wake. His chest rose in a sharp, painful rhythm. A word slipped from his lips, cracked and desperate. "Fire." Her breath caught. She hesitated only a moment before gently placing her hand on his arm. "Ethan, wake up." His eyes snapped open with a shudder, pupils blown wide in panic. For a fraction of a second, he didn't recognize her. Then his gaze locked onto hers, and some of that wild terror eased. "Ava," he rasped, dragging a hand through his hair as he sat upright. His breath came fast, too fast. "Sorry, I did not mean to wake you." She shook her head softly. "You were having a nightmare." He tried to compose himself, but the mask he usually wore had splintered. In the dim moonlight, she could see the tremor in his hands, the faint sheen of sweat at his temple. "It's nothing," he said too quickly. "Old memories." Ava studied him, her usual logical restraint warring with instinct. He had cared for her when she was sick, brusquely but sincerely. She wasn't going to let him push her away now. "You were terrified," she said gently. "You said fire. You can talk to me, you know." Ethan's jaw tightened. He exhaled slowly, like a man bracing himself against the truth. "My family," he said, voice low, measured, as if pulling each word from a wound. "When I was 16, a fire took everything. Our home, our money, my parents. It was fast, uncontrolled. My life since then has been engineered to never feel that powerless again." Ava's breath caught, her chest aching in a way she didn't expect. She didn't interrupt. "Control became the only safety I trusted," he continued. "Success became my oxygen. Predictability, my defense." His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Boredom was easier than fear. Ava moved closer, the pillow barrier shifting with her. She reached out, resting her hand lightly against the back of his arm. To her surprise, he didn't flinch. "You do not have to be invulnerable with me," she said quietly. "Not here, not tonight." His eyes softened with something raw and unguarded. For a long moment, they simply breathed in the same still air, the distance between them shrinking not through touch, but through truth. Then Ethan whispered the words that cracked her own armor. "Losing them taught me to never need anyone, but lying here with you terrifies me for a different reason." Ava swallowed hard. "Because it is real." Ethan nodded once. The pillow line between them suddenly felt meaningless. The silence thickened with something fragile and electric. She could feel his warmth, the steady beat of a heart he fought so hard to protect. In the darkness, Ava realized that her own lifelong pursuit of perfection had been its own kind of fear. And tonight, both of them had finally stopped performing. Their shared vulnerability sat between them like an open door neither dared to close. Outside, the wind whispered across the snow, unaware that inside the small farmhouse, two lives had quietly begun to change. Ava woke to chaos. Not the quiet, simmering tension she and Ethan had fallen asleep with, but a full-scale kitchen catastrophe. The scent hit her first, something burning, sharp and acrid, then the unmistakable shrieks of laughter. Childlike, wild, victorious. She bolted upright. The space beside her was empty, still faintly warm. A flicker of panic rushed through her. Ethan was gone. Throwing on a robe, she sprinted down the hallway, rehearsing every imaginable disaster scenario. Fire in the oven. Twins redecorating the ceiling. Ethan snapping under the pressure of this absurd arrangement and fleeing the farm entirely. Instead, she ran into something far more insane. The kitchen looked like a snowstorm had detonated indoors. Flour coated every surface. Sugar drifted across the floor in sparkling drifts. Chocolate smeared the cabinets. The twins shrieked with glee as they wielded mixing spoons like weapons. Ava's mother laughed helplessly, failing miserably to maintain order. And in the center of it all stood Ethan, barefoot, wearing an apron 3 sizes too big, hair dusted white, face streaked with flour. A billionaire mogul turned accidental pastry warrior. He spotted Ava in the doorway and grinned, a real grin, broad and bright and devastatingly boyish. "Gentlemen," he commanded the twins like a field general, "prepare for phase 2. You are losing ground." Nolan launched a glob of cookie dough. Connor dove behind the counter. Ethan ducked with impossible agility, retaliating with a flick of batter that landed squarely on Nolan's cheek. The twins howled in delight. Ava stood frozen, completely disoriented. "This cannot be happening," she whispered. But it was, and worse, her mother was smiling approvingly. "You cannot let them destroy the kitchen," Ava sputtered. Her voice cracked between disbelief and rising panic. "Look at the absolute disaster." Before she could finish, Ethan turned toward her with a spark in his green eyes that made her stomach flip. "Mrs. Mercer," he declared gravely, ignoring Ava, "this woman suffers from an advanced case of adultitis. Critical. Very tragic." Ava's mother nodded solemnly. Yes, I see it." "What is happening?" Ava whispered again. Then Nolan, correctly interpreting Ethan's mischief as permission, scooped both hands into a mound of flour and launched it directly at Ava. The white cloud engulfed her. She coughed, sputtering, wiping powder from her lashes. The room fell silent for one single anticipatory moment. Then something snapped. "Oh, you want a war?" Ava growled like a feral animal. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a full bag of powdered sugar, tore it open, and unleashed holy vengeance. The twins shrieked and scattered. Ethan laughed, actually laughed, and dove behind the island like a man half his age. Flour erupted. Sugar flew. Dough splattered across the walls. The kitchen became a battlefield of chaos, and for the first time in years, Ava didn't care about the mess. She ran. She dodged. She retaliated. And she laughed. A real laugh, a beautiful, unguarded sound that startled even her. Minutes later, the 4 of them collapsed onto the flour-caked floor, wheezing through laughter. Ava leaned back on her palms, breathless and exhilarated. Ethan sat beside her legs, stretched out, white dust still clinging to his jaw. His chest rose and fell with unrestrained amusement. Then Aunt Marjorie and Aunt Helen walked in. Their eyes widened comically at the carnage. Ava braced for judgment, absolute annihilation. Instead, Aunt Marjorie smiled. "Well, Ethan," she said warmly, "I see you have finally brought some joy out of our Ava." Aunt Helen nodded approvingly. The man is good for her. Ava's breath hitched. Ethan rose, extending a flour-dusted hand to her. When she took it, he brushed a clump of sugar from her cheek, his fingers lingering a second too long. Their eyes met. No performance, no contract, just something real and dangerously warm. That he murmured, voice rough and sincere, was liberating. Ava's heart pounded because she knew he wasn't talking about the flour war at all. Evening wrapped the farmhouse in a soft golden glow as the family gathered in the living room to decorate the enormous Christmas tree. Laughter floated through the air like music, and the smell of pine and cinnamon drifted from every corner. Ava tried to lose herself in the familiar warmth of the tradition, but her mind kept drifting to Ethan, to the flour-dusted smile he had given her that morning, to the way he had looked at her as if she were someone worth unraveling for. She moved around the tree with deliberate focus, directing her nephews as they balanced on a step stool to hang delicate glass ornaments. Her sweater was old, cozy, and utterly unprofessional, and yet for once, she didn't mind. The city version of herself felt far away. Ethan lingered in the doorway, watching her. He thought he was being subtle, but Ava felt his gaze like a hand against her spine. She turned once and caught him staring. He didn't look away. There was something in his expression, something unguarded, something that refused to be ignored. Her breath caught in her throat before she forced herself to return her attention to the twins. The final ornament, the gleaming golden star, was lifted triumphantly toward the top of the tree. Everyone applauded as it settled into place. Ava's mother clapped excitedly. Her father smiled with pride. The room glowed with contentment. Then Aunt Marjorie struck. "Oh, look," she announced loudly, raising a sprig of mistletoe high into the air. Mistletoe. The room hushed. Ava's stomach plummeted. Her aunts exchanged conspiratorial smiles before stepping aside to reveal Ethan directly behind them, standing far too close to her. "A little holiday cheer," Marjorie added, giving Ava a gentle nudge toward him. Ava's brain scrambled. "This is a performance. Act. Keep it light. Do not let your heart get involved." Ethan stepped closer. He didn't look amused. He looked determined. He placed his hands on her waist, fingers warm even through the knit of her sweater. The contact was steady and anchoring, sending a ripple of awareness up her spine. Ava's breath hitched. "Just a quick kiss for the audience," Ethan murmured, his breath brushing her ear. But the moment their lips touched, it was not quick. It was not polite. It was not pretend. It started soft, a gentle brush, but something ignited instantly between them. The months of quiet tension, the shared vulnerability of the night before, the laughter in the flower storm, every unspoken truth detonated in that single moment. His hand tightened at her waist, pulling her closer. Her fingers curled instinctively into the fabric of his sweater. The kiss deepened, becoming a confession neither of them had prepared for. The world around them disappeared. The lights, the family, the tree, everything blurred into insignificance. There was only him and her, and the terrifying, beautiful realization that this was real. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. Silence fell across the room, but Ava didn't notice. She could hear only her heartbeat pounding like a drum. Ethan looked at her as though he had been struck. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by shock and something far more vulnerable. Something she recognized because it lived inside her too. That was not acting. Ava stepped back, her hands trembling. Panic and longing collided violently inside her. She had crossed a line she had drawn for her own protection. The fixed-term clause hung over her like a blade. Midnight on Christmas Day. After that, he was gone. Ethan swallowed hard, his jaw tight, his eyes full of the same wild, fearful truth. They had broken the contract, and they both knew it. The family began clapping, mistaking the silence for shyness, but Ava barely heard them. She felt her world shift irrevocably. She had hired a man to be her fake boyfriend, and she had fallen hopelessly, truly, for the one person she was contractually required to let go. The hours after the mistletoe kiss unfolded like a slow unraveling. Ava and Ethan moved through the farmhouse like two ghosts tethered by invisible threads, always aware of each other, yet doing everything possible to avoid collision. Their conversations were clipped, their smiles forced, their distance painfully deliberate. Every stolen glance carried the echo of the kiss that had shattered the neat boundaries they had so carefully constructed. The family, interpreting the tension as the natural awkwardness of a deepening romance, watched them with satisfied, knowing smiles. But inside Ava's chest, a storm churned. Fear and longing battled relentlessly. Ethan had kissed her like a man drowning, desperate for air, and she had answered like a woman who had finally stopped pretending she did not want to be found. The next morning, Ava woke with a throat like hot sandpaper and a pounding ache behind her eyes. She pushed herself through breakfast, trying to appear normal, but Ethan saw through her immediately. He always did. He watched her from across the table, his expression unreadable, until her coffee cup trembled slightly in her hand. Then he stood abruptly and moved to her side. "You have a fever," he announced calmly, but with an edge of concern she couldn't ignore. She tried to protest, but he ignored her, lifting the cup gently from her hands. "Ava, you are not fine. You need to lie down." She let him guide her back to her room, hating how weak she felt, but secretly comforted by his steady presence. He fetched a thermometer. When it beeped, he let out a tight exhale. 101.5. Flu, or close to it. You need rest. I'll take care of the rest. He slipped back into his efficient, no-nonsense mode, the armor he used when feelings threatened to surface. But despite his cool tone, he stayed by her side all day. He prepared tea, inflated extra pillows, measured her medication with precision, and checked her temperature every hour. He canceled his own plans, leaving his laptop open beside her bed as he worked in silence. It wasn't tenderness, but it was care, real and grounding. By evening, the fever eased. Ava ventured onto the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. Ethan stood there in the cold, staring at the falling snow as if trying to freeze his thoughts in place. She approached quietly, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Doctor is off duty," she said lightly, offering him one. He accepted, but kept his gaze fixed on the snow. "Just fulfilling contract terms. Can't have my fake girlfriend collapsing. Poor optics." She ignored the cold tone. "Thank you, Ethan. You were kind." A silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. "My mother said she was relieved to see me with you," Ava whispered. "Said she hadn't seen me truly happy in years." He flinched subtly. "I'm not good for you, Ava. I'm a complication, and you don't want complications." She stepped closer. "You're running." He turned sharply. "I'm protecting myself, and you. You made it clear what you want. Control, logic, safety." Ava's chest tightened. "I was afraid, and I still am, but running won't fix it." He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders, coldness settling back over him. "I'm taking a walk. I need space." He walked away into the night, leaving her standing alone in the swirling snow. She watched his silhouette shrink until the darkness swallowed him whole. Only then did she understand fully. He wasn't just walking away from her, he was walking away from the possibility of them, because it terrified him as much as it terrified her. The tension in the farmhouse tightened like a wire pulled to its limit. Each hour felt heavier as Christmas Eve crept toward midnight, the moment the contract would dissolve and Ethan would walk out of her life exactly as planned. Ava tried to stay present in the festivities, tried to smile, tried to laugh at her nephew's antics as they raced around the living room with wrapping paper capes. But every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Ethan stayed close enough to see, but far enough to avoid touching her. His eyes never lingered long, yet they always found her. Every time their gazes collided, something in both of them flinched, as if reminding them of the kiss that had broken everything and stitched them together in ways neither knew how to undo. When dinner began, Ava's father raised his glass. "Before we carve the turkey," he said, "I want to make a toast to the newest member of our family, Brandon." Ava felt Ethan stiffen beside her. Her father continued warmly, "Thank you for making our Ava laugh again. Thank you for bringing her home to us. Thank you for making her feel safe enough to be herself." The warmth in the room was palpable, a blanket of genuine affection Ethan clearly didn't know how to hold. His eyes softened, then immediately darkened, as if the praise was both a gift and a wound. Ava looked at him, and something inside her lungs refused to function. He belonged here, he belonged with her, and she was about to lose him. After dinner, the family gathered around the tree once more for the last round of gifts. Ethan handed Ava a small, beautifully wrapped box. "No extravagant gifts," he whispered, "but this is technically a tool." She opened it and felt her breath catch. A leather-bound sketchbook and a set of charcoal pencils. He remembered. He had listened. He had seen her. Emotion hit her harder than the fever had. She grabbed his arm and pulled him into the hallway. "This is too much," she whispered. "We need to talk. About the kiss. About this." He met her gaze with guarded eyes. "It was a lapse in judgment," he said. "A momentary mistake." "No." Ava shook her head fiercely. "It was real, and that's the problem. If I let myself feel this, I don't know what changes. I don't know what I lose." She swallowed hard. "Control terrifies me, Ethan, but losing myself terrifies me more." He absorbed her words with a quiet that hurt. Then he stepped back, his expression shuddering. "Of course," he said coolly. "The contract is clear. Fixed term, no extensions, no feelings. Consider the boundaries restored." With every word, he reinforced a wall she had already begun to regret building. When he walked away, it felt like something inside her cracked. The clock chimed 11, only 1 hour left. By the time midnight approached, the entire house was buzzing with excitement for Christmas morning, yet Ava felt hollow. She lingered with Ethan near the dining room doorway, both suspended between desire and duty. He reached out, fingertips brushing her cheek in a gesture so soft she nearly broke. "I don't want to go," he whispered. "Then don't," she pleaded. "Stay, we can figure this out." The grandfather clock chimed. He inhaled sharply as though struck. "I wrote the contract," he said, voice heavy, "and I won't break it." When the final chime rang, he stepped back, eyes full of everything he wouldn't say. "Thank you, Ava," he murmured. "This was the best Christmas." Then he walked away from her, from the warmth, from the possibility they had almost grasped. The next morning, Ava sat alone in her high-rise office, staring at a stack of legal briefs. The silence was suffocating. Her job, once a refuge, now felt cold and brittle. She picked up her pencil and opened the sketchbook he gave her. The first thing she drew was not a cityscape, not a case diagram, but the farm. The twins pulling a sled, Ethan behind them laughing. She closed the book with a trembling exhale. 2 weeks later, her entire world collapsed again. In the meeting, her senior partner implied her distraction caused a lost case. Later that afternoon, she learned the truth. The case had been rigged. Henderson had taken a bribe. Her firm, the one she had sacrificed her life to, was corrupt to its core. The fortress she built her life around began to crumble. And Ava realized with stunning clarity that she was no longer willing to live a life built on fear. She walked into Henderson's office, placed her resignation letter on his desk, and said simply, "I'm done." Then she stepped out onto the street, breathing for what felt like the first time in years. Her phone rang. A voice she had been aching to hear poured softly through the receiver. "Hello, Advocate Mercer. How is your resource management going?" It was Ethan, and for the first time, Ava understood. She hadn't lost him at midnight. She had simply not chosen him yet. Snow blanketed Northwood in a quiet shimmer as Ava stepped out of the taxi, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp winter air. The town looked exactly as she remembered it, yet everything inside her had shifted. 2 weeks of distance had clarified what months of denial had blurred. She was done hiding from herself. She was done choosing fear over possibility. The farmhouse lights glowed warmly through the trees, and for a moment she simply stood still, letting the familiarity steady her. She clutched Ethan's sketchbook against her chest as though it were a compass pointing her home. Inside, the living room hummed with the gentle chaos of family. Her mother gasped in delight when she entered. Her father stood and opened his arms. Ava let herself be enveloped, grounding her heart in the warmth she had tried so hard to live without. But beneath the comfort, one absence pulsed like a bruise. Ethan wasn't there. Her mother cleared her throat softly. "He came by yesterday. He didn't stay long, looked lost, asked if you were all right." A flicker of hope burned through her. "Where is he now?" Her mother hesitated before answering. "At the workshop behind the barn. He's been working there a lot lately." Ava didn't wait. She slipped back outside, boots crunching on the snow, the cold air sharp against her cheeks. The world was a muted palette of whites and grays, except for the golden light spilling from the windows of the old woodworking shed. She paused at the door, heart pounding. Then she pushed it open. Ethan stood inside, surrounded by sawdust and half-carved wooden pieces. He looked up sharply when he heard her, surprise flickering into something deeper, something unguarded. His hair was slightly tousled, his sleeves rolled, and his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept well in days. "Ava," he breathed. She stepped inside the warmth. "I quit my job." His jaw tightened. "Because of me?" "Because of me," she corrected. "Because I was living a life that made me feel small. Because I was hiding in work instead of choosing the things that matter." She took a breath. "And you matter." Emotion flickered across his face, raw and pained. "Ava, you don't know what you're saying. You walked away once. I can't go through that again. You were clear about what you wanted. I was clear about what I was afraid of," she replied quietly. But fear is not a reason to run from something real. He turned away, bracing his hands on the workbench. You didn't choose me at midnight. No, she admitted, but I'm choosing you now. He closed his eyes. That sketchbook you gave me, she said, taking a step closer. It wasn't just a gift, it was a mirror. You saw me when I didn't see myself. You believed in the parts of me I abandoned. That matters. You matter. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. Ava, it hurt. When I left that night, it felt like something inside me was tearing. And I told myself it was better this way, that the contract was the shield we needed, that lines were safer than feelings. She touched his arm gently. I don't want safe anymore. He looked at her, then really looked. His defenses cracked like thin ice. The vulnerability between them was almost unbearable. Ava whispered Ethan, Are you sure? She stepped closer until their breaths mingled. Yes, I'm sure. I'm choosing you. No contracts, no terms, no deadlines. His composure finally collapsed. A breath escaped him, almost a laugh, almost a sob. He cupped her face with both hands, and this time, when he kissed her, it was not hesitant or accidental or born of tradition. It was deliberate, fierce, certain, a promise. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I built something for you, he murmured. I told myself it was for your mother, but that was a lie. He led her to the corner of the workshop, where a wooden easel stood polished, smooth, and waiting. A place to create, he said, for your drawings, for your life, for whatever comes next. Tears filled her eyes. It was simple and beautiful and entirely him. She threw her arms around him. He held her tightly, grounding her in the warmth she had been starved of for years. Outside, the snow continued to fall, settling over Northwood in a soft white hush as if blessing the moment. Ava had spent years building walls. Tonight, she finally built a beginning. And this time, she chose love.